Well, it quieted down really nicely. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dan Wood. I'm VP of Programs here in the Democratic Club. Normally, one of our co-presidents would come up and bid you a welcome. One of them, Gabby Dolphin, unfortunately had a little fight with the bottom stair on the stairway coming up here. And so she's in the back if you want to just wave to her, and you can go visit her later. But she's icing her leg. And Malia Vela was not able to be here right now. So we'll just get started. We're going to be doing our debate shortly, so if the candidates want to start making their way up gradually. And then Philip is going to do a few announcements about some upcoming events.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Philip James. I'm the Vice President of Programs for the City of Alameda Democratic Club. Two events that are upcoming that I want people to know about. First of all, not tomorrow, but next Thursday at Alameda Island Brewing Company, we're going to be doing another one of our Thirsty Thursdays with the Democrats. Come by around 7 p.m., get to know one another, have some beer, talk about the results of tonight, talk about what you're excited about for 2018, and then far in the future, we're starting the planning now. The City of Alameda Democratic Club has a tradition of being a participant in the Mayor's 4th of July Parade in Alameda. We want to hear from you if that's an event that the membership is interested in helping us with and seeing us as a part of that parade. So if you're interested in helping or being part of the committee for the 4th of July Parade, please find me or message our Facebook page or send us an email to the club email and let us know if you're interested. So again, next Thursday, and then think about July. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, let me just talk a little bit about our program for tonight. As most of you probably know, the main program is a debate between the two candidates for District Attorney of Alameda County. Nancy O'Malley is already sitting down, Pamela Price, making her way to the stage or to the table now. The way we're going to do this is we've set up for each candidate to have a 5-minute opening statement, and unless somebody really wants to go first or second, we can flip a coin, although I don't think I have a coin, so maybe somebody else has a coin they can offer. And then we just have a number of questions, and we can we actually have some cards in the back, or maybe they're being passed around. Yeah, Sherry is waving her hand if you want to get a card with a question. And I will ask the question. I think generally the questions are usually for both candidates to answer. And probably just to keep it sort of fair, we'll, for about the first half or so, we'll have it in the same order, A, B, that kind of thing. And then maybe we can just flip the order so that the candidate who got to speak first will then speak second. And that'll go on for about 45 minutes or so. Oh, thank you, Sylvia. Okay. Let me make sure it says a head and a tail. Okay. That'll be useful. And then at towards the end, at about 8:15 is our attempt. We're going to be shooting for about 8:15 for the candidates to do closing statements, 5 minutes each. And again, by that point, we'll be sort of in reverse order. And then the exciting part is that then we ask the candidates to leave the room so we can talk about them behind their backs. And then members are welcome to raise their hand, and if you have a particular reason why you're advocating for one candidate or another, let us know. And then we'll be having a vote. Hopefully members who are eligible to vote have received their ballots and either already dropped them off if you know what you're doing, or if you're ready to be convinced by what you hear tonight, that's what I'm hoping. We'll have a chance to drop them off, and we'll count the votes and announce the results, and if we have any final announcements. But of course you can, we're not going to force you to stay for the whole thing. If you want to just cast your vote at the end of the panel, and you'll find out, we'll be sending out an email announcement hopefully tomorrow morning with the results. So Sherry has some cards if there are any other questions. And hey, we're right on time. Look at that. Okay. All right. So do either of you really want to go first? Like, if for all we know, one of you really wants to go first and one really wants to go second? Or should we just flip a coin? Okay, nobody's saying anything. All right. All right. I'm going to give you incumbent's privilege if you can call it in the air.
Heads.
All right. It is tails. All right. So, your choice, first or second?
I go.
Okay.
All right, thank
All right, and if you're welcome to stay here, or if you want to stand at the podium, that's fine, either one. But you each have microphones and they're on, so you're welcome to just sit there. It might be easier to do it that way.
Okay. I need to stand up. Can I?
And Mike is keeping time. Where are you, Mike? So you see Mike McMahon over there is your timekeeper.
Hello, okay. Is there another timekeeper somewhere in the room?
I'll give you 30 seconds, 15, and I stand up. You're supposed to be done.
Can you give me 1 minute, please? Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Pamela Price, and I am running to be the next District Attorney of Alameda County. I have been a community servant in this community for over 26 years. I've successfully worked as a civil rights attorney, successfully arguing against racial harassment in the United States Supreme Court, and created new laws in both education and employment to stop sexual harassment. I've been a Northern California super lawyer every year since 2003. But you see, I've been living my making, because my story really begins on the night that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. My entire life changed. By the time I was 13, I got arrested in a civil rights demonstration. I got tracked into the juvenile justice and the foster care system. The things that we celebrate our children for today, for standing up for what they believe is right, was not acceptable during the time that I came of age. And so I got punished harshly, along with literally millions of other children like myself. Some of them are still in the criminal justice system, still locked away in prisons today. So I want us to be able to acknowledge that as we stand in this moment. I stand before you today because 3 women kept their hands on me: Alice Aaron, Lorena O'Donnell, and Amy Jenkins, because they saw something in me that they wouldn't let me throw my life away, because they protected me at a time when children were not being protected, who were actually advocating on behalf of justice. They told me to get an education, which I did. I got a great education at Yale. I got a great education at UC Berkeley when I came here to go to law school. And I know that to whom much is given, much is asked. And so I've dedicated my life to fighting for justice for everyday people. I had a great career as a civil rights attorney, but I decided to run for this position because I am a drum major for justice, because for too long, prosecutors have forgotten that their mission is to protect public safety by advancing justice. Because prosecutors have been at the heart of mass incarceration, that they have forgotten that literally they drove the bus from the playgrounds to the prisons. In 30 years, we built 22 prisons and 1 university. And if you build prisons, prosecutors will fill them up for you. We now know that we can't solve our problems by locking everyone up. And so we have overwhelmingly voted in Alameda County for the change that has swept the country. Criminal justice reform is at the top of the agenda in this moment. In our county, we have voted overwhelmingly for criminal justice reform, to stop charging juveniles as adults, to lower felonies to misdemeanors, to give everyone a second chance at a first-class life. The Incumbent has campaigned against criminal justice reform, and the organization that she leads has campaigned, and even in this moment is fighting against bail reform, something that we desperately need in Alameda County. And so it is up to us to be part of the wave of change in this country. It is up to us to give our community a chance at restoring the community, at redeeming the lives that have been destroyed by mass incarceration. We have an obligation, and our community is desperate for police accountability. So I will briefly talk about the 3 differences between myself and the Incumbent. Number 1, I will hold bad cops accountable for bad acts. Thank you. Thank you. We have to get beyond the point where we simply turned a blind eye to officers who beat or kill people, who engage in unconstitutional conduct, sex trafficking, or obstruction of justice. Number 2, I will root out and eliminate the gross racial and economic disparities that have pervaded our criminal justice system. In Alameda County, we have statistics that show that up to 85% of the people in Santa Rita County Jail are pretrial detainees. In Alameda County, we know that black children are less than 11% of the population. They are 53% of all felony arrests. We know that in Alameda County, we have been prosecuting juveniles as adults. We have been doing terrible things with respect to that are based on racial disparities, and that we have to stop that. It is time for a change. I represent that change. It is our responsibility to embrace that change. So thank you very much for having us, and I look forward to this discussion tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Nancy O'Malley, and I am the district attorney. When I was in college, I became a volunteer for a rape crisis center and a domestic violence shelter. And what I witnessed was only injustice of how victims were being treated. That everything about the system at that time was to push victims away, to shame them, to embarrass them, to blame them. And I knew then that when I got into a position where I could do something about it, that would be one of my primary goals in life, was to change that paradigm for how victims of crime are treated in our criminal justice system. Shortly after graduating from college, I was diagnosed with cancer. And while the doctors told me you may not live, I knew then that if I did live, that I was going to commit my life to public safety and to helping others, and to be strong for people who didn't have strength left, to be the voice for people who didn't have a voice, and to bring humanity to people's lives. And that is what I have done every day of my adult life. I'm a reform prosecutor. So while my opponent wants to say something about the California DA's Association, and I know there's a piece of paper handed out, I represent and I lead this county, the Alameda County. And in this county, we have created initiatives we call Smart Solutions for Safe Communities. And what does that mean? Well, Smart Solutions for Safe Communities has several multifaceted components, because the truth is, the district attorney's office does more than just prosecute crimes. We uphold public safety in this community, and that, as I said, is multifaceted. The areas where we have put focus is in criminal justice reform. I have worked on criminal justice reform since I entered the office, but more currently since becoming DA, and over the last couple of years, we have focused on bail reform, eliminating the cash bail system. My opponent is, the number that she has quoted to you is actually not correct. We get weekly statistics because I'm a data-driven person. Data helps us figure out what are the proper and appropriate responses that we can build in initiatives. 24% of the people who are in Santa Rita jail are pre-trial. That means 76% of the people who are pre-trial are not in custody. And how are we able to do that in protecting our community? Well, first, we have pre-trial programs. We've reduced incarceration. San Bernardino is a county that is the equivalent size, demographics, crime rate. They have 6,000 people in their jail. That is mass incarceration. Alameda County has 1,500 in jail because we have people out of jail and into programs. We've created more collaborative courts than any other county in the state. And I've been at the forefront of creating those collaborative courts that look at people as individuals and not just as the next person in line coming down the well. More than 8,000 people participated in the collaborative courts. We charged last year a little bit over 6,000 felony cases. But we didn't charge the equivalent number because we're referring people into other programs. We're removing barriers from their criminal history so that they can get jobs and move on through our Crossroads, through Clean Slate, which I created with the Community Law Center, through our work with Prop 47 and Prop 64. Now let me tell you another part of our smart solutions, and that is with victims of crime. My office last year in 2017 provided over 90,000 services to victims of crime. 30,000 people we served who were impacted by crime. And that is 15,000 from our Family Justice Center, which is an award-winning center, and another 15,000 working through the Victim Witness Program. And we've brought more than $4.5 million into this county to help those victims get the services that they need. The other components that we have are initiatives like the Family Justice Center, our award-winning leadership in combating human trafficking, in providing advocacy for immigrants through immigration policies, for people who are accused of crime, and for being able to get help with U visas and T visas for people who have been victims of crime. We have reduced filings in juvenile justice by 2/3. By 2/3. When I became the district attorney, the average number of files against a juvenile in juvenile court was about 2,000. Last year, we filed just a little over 500. And we have several programs that we've created for juveniles. And the last thing is prevention through empowerment. And I'm proud of the youth programs that we have to help people, to help children have a full, wonderful life. Thank you.
All right, thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. We have quite a few questions here. I'd like to limit your answers to 2 minutes each, and we'll start with Ms. Price. The first question is, what is your opinion on the student-led walkouts that happened today across the county and across the country, and the issue of guns in schools in general?
We went this morning, I went with members of my team to Oakland Technical High School. We would have come to Alameda. We would have gone wherever we could. As I alluded to, in 1969, I organized a sit-in in my high school, and as a result, I got expelled because the school did not believe that it was appropriate for students to protest the racial killings that were occurring in Cincinnati, Ohio at that time. So I understand and I appreciate so much that we as a community, as a nation, as parents, as teachers, as activists, that we're supporting our young people. Because young people were critical. They weren't leading the civil rights movement, but they were absolutely critical to the basic civil rights movement that started in the early 60s, that then led and spawned so many other movements that were beneficial, that allowed us to be who we are as a society, that gave us a better view about civil rights, about human rights, that led to the development of so much respect for people as people. And so I was really, I have been inspired not only by the children who came out today. There's a picture of me with a young man. He's maybe 5, 6. He says, "More fun, no guns." That's a beautiful thing. So ending gun violence in Alameda County is point number 6 of my 10-point platform. We are number 4 in the state in terms of the homicides, the number of homicides of kids between 10 and 24. That is too high of a statistic. If you live in Oakland, you have and something happens to your loved ones, the solve rate for homicides in Oakland is 30%. That is ridiculous. We have to do more to stop gun violence and to deal with our criminal, the crimes that get committed of violence against people. Thank you.
We're very proud of all the children in Alameda County and the children across America who stepped out of their class at 10 o'clock today and stepped out in their school. I work with the Castro Valley School District, I work with the Dublin School District, I work with the Union City and Fremont School Districts. We encouraged the young people, and we are thrilled that the school superintendents and the school principals endorsed those young people stepping out and activating their own voices in the political process. I think that students who are afraid to go to school because they don't know what's going to happen. Just since that happened last week, we had 2 threats of school shootings in Alameda County by juveniles. So we responded to them, of course, but I have looked at every one of the school-based shootings since Columbine in 1999. We've had 208. 75% of those school shootings were committed by someone under 18 years old. And of that group, more than 50% were committed by someone 15 or younger. So we have an issue with people not locking up their guns. These children are not going out and buying guns. They're getting them from their houses. And what we've been doing around that is a couple of things. We have a Justice Academy, a DA Justice Academy. We've had 30 youth from Alameda high schools in our academy, and we're helping them find their activist voice so that they can step up and be leaders in their school around things like gun violence and sexual harassment, sexual assault. We also have, I'm a part of a Prosecutors Against Gun Violence. You may have seen our billboards, lock up your gun, save a life. This is our campaign, which is telling people about the laws in California of locking up your gun so it doesn't get stolen in a burglary and used in a crime, or it doesn't fall in the hands of a child. And that campaign is now going national. And lastly, I will say that the crime statistics in Oakland have gone significantly down. The shootings are significantly down.
Okay, next question. We'll start with Ms. Price. The DA's office is a nonpartisan office, but the members of this audience are generally Democrats and therefore hold Democratic values. In what specific ways do your values align with the Democratic Party values and platform?
Glad you asked that question. I just happen to have the 2018 platform, which was adopted a few weeks ago when we were in San Diego representing you at the California Democratic Party convention. And the Democratic Party platform for criminal justice is one of the most progressive platforms in the country. And I was at a meeting prior to the convention with Congresswoman Barbara Lee, where she talked about how proud she is of the fact that we have passed this platform and how useful it is to her in pushing the national agenda and conversation around criminal justice. So my 10-point platform, which is at price4da.com, we incorporate, again, we have point number 5, which calls for police accountability, that we will have a conviction integrity unit that will fairly and promptly investigate all allegations of police misconduct. That's reflected in the Democratic Party platform. Our California Democratic Party platform says we're against the death penalty, we're against charging juveniles as adults, we're against sending people to private prisons out of state, we're against the bail system, we're against using the levers within the criminal justice system to over-criminalize poverty, which is part of what has just been going on. It's both race and economic disparities that have are totally pervasive and have not been addressed by the current administration, and they've been allowed to go unaddressed. And so that part is the platform opposes we support the legalization of marijuana. We support contact and communication between loved ones who are incarcerated and people on the outside. Families have to participate in the reentry program, and reentry begins inside the walls. I have the model from AB 109 from Contra Costa County, having worked with the founder of Men and Women of Purpose. So we know how to do it right. Thank you.
So first, let me just say that we do have public integrity units. When police officers break the law, they get prosecuted. We have 7 officers right now out of the Sheriff's Department that are being prosecuted for bad conduct in the jail. When the police break the law, they get prosecuted. We have, on the issue of first of all, I have a lifelong Democrat and a very big D Democrat. In my office, there have been 198 individuals that we've looked at who would be eligible for capital punishment. There's only been 1, and it was an extremely heinous, terrible crime. There was no question that the person was guilty, and that it was that was so rare that it was the only 1 out of 198. In the juvenile court, we looked last year at 1,100 cases, 2 juveniles who have committed extremely heinous crimes. 1 juvenile tortured, shot, and then lit 3 people on fire. And he's just shy of 18, so he's going into adult court. We have captured and addressed bail reform, and we have a whole protocol, and I've led that with our court to get the judges, to make sure the judges are also aware of Humphrey decision, which I support and endorse. We don't have people out of state. I will say the thing about giving people the chance. A friend told me once, nothing stops a bullet faster than a job. So I work closely with the building trades to get jobs. But let me just say, I am a Democrat who is endorsed by our Democrat representatives, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris, by Assembly Member Eric Swalwell, Jimmy Panetta, Senator Nancy Skinner, Bob Wykowski, Hannah Beth Jackson, Assemblymember Quirk, Kansan Chu, and Tony Thurman, our mayor and our city council, police and fire, and Judge Henderson, who is the icon of civil justice in this century. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of somewhat one-sided questions. So let's see. Actually, let's start with this one, so that way both of you can answer the question with a rebuttal, essentially. So for Pamela Price, what experience do you have in managing a large budget and a far-flung organization?
I have a variety of experiences managing a large budget and a somewhat far-flung organization, if you consider the United States of America. I was the interim executive director for the San Francisco Lawyers Committee for about 6 months, and then I served on the board for about 8 years, and during that time, including 2 terms as a chair of the board. And so we were responsible for oversight, obviously fiduciary duties. I established a governance committee on that board. I served on virtually every budget finance committee, and we developed annual budgets. Those budgets incorporated not only our ability to have staff in the office, but also our interaction with law firms throughout the Bay Area, predominantly San Francisco. The Lawyers Committee, if you don't know, we manage and provide pro bono services to immigrants, and racial discrimination is one of our priorities. We established the Second Chance Clinic in San Francisco, which brought in literally thousands of lawyers every year to provide those services. So I had many years working with the board both as a chair of the board and as a paid employee, and just being very involved in that organization. We went through the worst times in 2008 when the market crashed, and we had to deal with that. So had a lot of experience doing that. Also, I spent 27 years owning a business in Oakland, and literally was blessed to be able to settle multi-million-dollar cases, and to have to budget for how those cases got handled, both inside my office as well as working with co-counsel throughout the country. So I've had a lot of experience managing people both in my office, outside of my office, and I understand how you establish, and I did establish from the day I started in 1991, systems on how to manage people and budgets.
When I took over the district attorney's office, we had about 300 employees. However, because we were changing the way we were doing business and reforming the criminal justice system, which costs more money. It costs more money, and it takes more personnel to look at people as individuals and to create individual success plans. Since I've been district attorney, I've added 100 people to my staff. And those 100 people are working to combat human trafficking, which is a program that we're known for across the country and even across the world. We have over 70 people that work at the Family Justice Center, which I fund. I've reinvested money that I found into a program we call DIL, which is Developing Impacted Lives. And that's work I'm doing with about 12 men who have all been to prison for murder, who are my advisors working with me in partnership to try to disrupt the flow of juvenile and young people into the criminal justice system. We have created these collaborative courts so that we can, and also expanded the amount of jobs and processes that we have available for people who are involved in crime, including the Justice Restoration Project, which is taking young people out of the probation system and putting them into an individualized pathway for success based on what they need. All of this costs money. Since when I took over, the budget for Alameda County was $59 million from the county. I generate almost $17 million a year to be able to fund all of these programs and to support my community partners like Dreamcatcher and A Safe Place and Claire's House and all of these programs that are working to help girls and boys recover from human trafficking. So how you manage this, it takes leadership, it takes experience, it takes respect, and it takes the kind of track record that I have proven since I joined the office, but more importantly, for the last 8 years. Thank you.
There have been some really good questions coming in, and I'm going to try to combine. There are some that are very similar, so I'm going to try to combine them. On January 3rd, 2018, BART police officer Joseph Metu shot Salim Tyndall 3 times and killed him. Is the DA's office doing all that it can and should be doing to bring justice for Mr. Tyndall and his family? How can the DA going forward help put an end to our national plague of the police officers shooting citizens? Ms. Price.
Obviously, as an outsider, I can only comment on what the concerns are of a community member who would be very concerned if an officer shot someone 3 times in the back and then 2 weeks later was back on the job. I've represented police officers, I've sued police officers. I've never seen a situation where an officer engaged in conduct that involved the taking of a life and was able to simply walk away as if it never happened. 2 weeks is a very short time when you've taken someone's life to realize, to think about whether or not what you did was right. And certainly for a district attorney who takes seriously the lives of the people that she represents, to have essentially signed off on someone being back on the job, armed, given the authority to potentially hurt someone else. So I think that we need a more thorough, more transparent investigation of that situation. And I think certainly as a district attorney, part of what the district attorney's role is to engage with the public. For too long, district attorneys have essentially hidden in the dark, been quiet. It's very difficult, if you look at the website, it's very difficult to find a report on a killing in Oakland. We've had over 100 in-custody deaths, and we stand alone in the Bay Area without an in-custody investigation unit that investigates suspicious deaths. Anytime someone dies in connection with the police, that has to be investigated. Public safety requires public trust. We will never get to the point where we are safe or feel protected, none of us, if we do not have the ability to trust in our officers. And the way you do that is by holding them accountable.
In the first place, I don't control what BART does. I don't control the police department. I don't control the Alameda Police Department. There's a city manager, there's a mayor, there's a city council that set the policy for Alameda City. What I do, what my office does, is that when there's something like an officer-involved shooting, that we do a thorough investigation. And that takes time, because there are autopsy protocols that need to be addressed. There are other witnesses that need to be talked to. We don't comment on the investigations because the decision ultimately has to be made based on the evidence and the law, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we have been in contact with the family. We have reached out to them immediately, and we are in contact with the uncle of the young man who was killed. What I did when I became the district attorney is that we do prepare a report that outlines exactly what we found, exactly what the law is, and exactly the findings. The only time we didn't do it was when Meserly, the other BART officer, killed Oscar Grant. And we didn't file a report because we filed charges instead, and we prosecuted him in Los Angeles. When I became the district attorney, I made the change of all of those reports being public record, so anyone can read the reports. I also have an open door policy. I have people from the community coming in and talking to me about various issues all the time, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad that they're talking with me, and I'm glad they're filling me in, so that when things occur in their lives that where we can be involved because we have some level of authority or jurisdiction, we will get involved. And I've had 3 meetings just this week alone for various issues, elder abuse in one case and other types of crime. So we will hold police officers accountable when the facts warrant it and the law is there. And I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, so we're at about the halfway point. It's going quickly, and so I want to change the order around now, so I'm going to try to combine these 3 questions. Basically, different types of justice. One is, how do you feel about social justice versus real justice? In other words, what does the term restorative justice mean to you, and what we do to support and advance restorative justice? So feel free to use those 3 terms, and I'd like to start with DA O'Malley first.
Well, the role of the district attorney is to seek justice, not convictions. If the person is guilty, then the prosecutor's job, and this is the U.S. Supreme Court that outlines this, the prosecutor's job is to vigorously seek justice and hold people accountable who have committed crimes. It doesn't mean they have to go to jail. Some people commit violent crimes, like gun violence, as Ms. Price was talking about. Some of those people will go to jail, and some will go to prison when there's multiple murders or other types of crimes. That's the role of the prosecutor, not to get convictions, but to seek justice. So that's real justice. The second, social justice, is what a lot of the work that we're doing right now. And that is not just with people who have committed crimes, and I've already talked about the collaborative courts that give people that second chance or give them a different pathway that will lead to their success. Not what we think they need, but what they tell us they need in order to be successful. But secondly, social justice is about what we're doing with those who have been victims of crime. We talk about victims of human trafficking and make sure they have housing and support and mental health treatment and safe living environments. I'm working on a project right now, which we hope to open in April, called Claire's House, which is a house for girls who have been exploited and trafficked between 13 and 17. That's social justice for them. At our Family Justice Center, we've had over 350 women participate in our Women's Empowerment Program that helps them learn to be economically independent so they don't have to stay in violent relationships because they don't know how to get out otherwise. And we're teaching their children to read at the same time. That's social justice for victims of crime. And we have over 45 women that have participated in our job training program, which is being certified to write code, jobs for tomorrow and not yesterday. But at the same time, we reach out to our partners in the building trades and the other professional jobs for people to get a living wage, to get benefits, and to get a retirement plan. That's social justice for those people who have been impacted by crime, not because of anything they've done.
So, restorative justice, I'll address that first. Yes, we have some restorative justice programs in place in Alameda County. In 2015, according to the report given to the Board of Supervisors, 112 juvenile offenders were referred to the restorative justice program in 2015. Those are the ones that were referred, not the ones that completed the program. There were 120 participants in girls' court, and then there were 80 participants in the collaborative mental health court. So we have about 312 kids that got referred that were presumably participating in those programs out of a total of 1,000 kids that got prosecuted in this county. So over 70% of the children in this county are not getting restorative justice services. Moreover, the scope and the restrictions on the adult restorative justice programs from the feedback that we've gotten are way too restrictive. The veterans who need to be referred and need to provide services, and we all understand, particularly in the wake of the tragedy up north, that our veterans are, I heard a statistic that said at least 20 veterans a day kill themselves. We need to expand Veterans Court. The criteria to go into Veterans Court in this county is way too restrictive. We don't have a homeless court in this county, and we have favelas popping up all over the county. We don't have neighborhood courts, as they have had in San Francisco for more than 5 years. So there are opportunities that we need to provide alternatives to incarceration. That's the path that will take us to social justice and real justice.
Okay, next question. Has your campaign taken contributions from police and sheriff associations? If so, how much, and how can a DA avoid bias and conflicts of interest? Should a DA candidate be funded by groups that they may need to watch over? Again, we're starting with DA O'Malley.
I have taken contributions from fire and from the police. This is a law enforcement job, and we work with the police. As I said earlier, when police do things that are against the law or bad, they either get fired or they get prosecuted, depending on if it's personnel versus a crime. If it's a crime, they'll be prosecuted. But the police and people in the community that care about public safety, that care about stability, that care about leadership, that care about the truth, and making sure that when information is put out, it's accurate information, those are people that have are supporting me and have given me contributions. I will tell you that as the prosecutor, it is the responsibility of the DA to make decisions free of bias, free of influence, free of favoritism, free of my own personal political feelings. That's critical, because today I might agree with Ms. Price, but tomorrow I might agree with someone other than her. And so my decision can't be based on their personalities or my personality. It has to be based on the law and the facts. So we work with the police department. They bring our cases to us. I respect the police department, the good police officers that are doing their job every day. I respect the fire department who put themselves on the line and run into danger, not away from it. And I am honored that they respect me enough to put their resources to give me donations and to support me in my campaign. And that does not have anything to do with the decisions that are made. We do not charge about 50% of the cases that law enforcement presents to us. So we are exercising our authority, not because of influence or bias, but because we're basing it on the law and on the facts. And I just want to say that Ms. Price quotes 1,000 children prosecuted. 1,000 people were referred to the DA's office in 2015. 700 were charged, and then those 300 went off to the collaborative courts. So in the end, there were less than 400 children who actually were prosecuted in Alameda County in 2015.
On that last point, the report that was provided to the Alameda County Board of Supervisors said there were 1,500 children that were referred to the DA's office, not 1,000. And so I have a different vision of justice. I don't view the prosecutor's role as a law enforcement person. I understand that law enforcement has its responsibilities and duties. I believe that as a lawyer, I have a constitutional duty to ensure justice. That's my job. The police do the criminal part of the justice system. I do the justice part of the justice system, which means that I have to be independent. There is something as a lawyer, they tell us about conflicts of interest. There's an actual conflict, and then there's the appearance of impropriety. And I will say to you that when we have a district attorney that accepts $10,000 from the Fremont Police Officers Association and then clears the Fremont police officers of killing an unarmed 16-year-old child in a car, that's an appearance of impropriety. And so I do believe that that the district attorney has an obligation not to accept money from police officers' unions, and I do not accept money from them. I will not accept corporate money in this campaign, and therefore I have been endorsed by our Revolution chapters throughout this Bay Area. This is a grassroots campaign. The district attorney represents the people, and sometimes the interests of the people and the police conflict. In 2016, we lost 3 police chiefs in Oakland, all of whom engaged in some form of obstruction of justice, and no one was prosecuted.
Okay, I'm going to try to combine 4 cards here. So the original main question is directed to DA O'Malley, and then we'll just have a similar response for Ms. Price. DA O'Malley, can you please address why you remain neutral on or opposed these initiatives that California passed by wide margins? Proposition 36 reforms 3 strikes, Proposition 47 changes some nonviolent felonies to misdemeanors, and Prop 57 increases access to parole for nonviolent crimes and allow judges, not prosecutors, to decide whether to try juveniles as adults. And I'm also going to throw in, your opinion of the death penalty, because that's also come up in California propositions. And so then for Ms. Price, just basically to get your opinions on these matters as well. So starting with you, Emily.
So when 3 strikes was reformed, we've always exercised our discretion around 3 strikes. When 3 strikes was reformed, there were 7 people returned from prison for resentencing. 7. We didn't need an initiative to tell us how to manage 3 strikes. And I'm proud of the fact that we used our discretion to make sure that people weren't unnecessarily incarcerated for a longer period of time because of their prior convictions. On Prop 47, I've talked about this quite a bit. Then I've talked to the authors and I've talked to the people who sponsored it. Prop 47 reduced several felony level crimes to misdemeanors. 76% of those crimes that became misdemeanors were already being prosecuted as misdemeanors in Alameda County District Attorney's Office. Again, we didn't need a proposition to tell us to do that. Where I had a problem with Prop 47 is that it made the possession of a date rape drug only a misdemeanor. And I have worked with sexual assault survivors since I was 18 years old. And I could not support an initiative where a possession of a date rape drug, which is used to make someone incapacitated to sexually assault them, I could not support that. And also, stealing a gun would only be a misdemeanor. And for the gun violence in this county, I could not support that. On Prop 57, I agreed with the way the initiative. I talked to the governor about it, and the 2 issues that I had with that were human trafficking, which is a big initiative. My office has prosecuted almost 600 human trafficking cases involving children. That would have made it so a person who's convicted of human trafficking would be able to do the minimum term, not the term for all of the victims that he trafficked, but the minimum term as if it was only 1 victim. And the same thing for raping someone who is unconscious. They could get the minimum term. And so that was an oversight on the governor's part, as he told me, that he would have included those in the protections for Prop 57. Otherwise, we're doing all of that. The last one that you talked about was my feeling on the death penalty. I've been clear from the first day I walked into the office, and that is that if there was ever a decision made to impose the death penalty or to seek the death penalty, because it's the jury and the judge who impose it, if it was ever a decision made, it would be 3 criteria. It was very, very rarely done. And as I shared with you a little bit ago, we've looked at 198 cases, and there's only been 1 involving a very, very heinous murder, execution of children. The second criteria for me was that it had to be only in the most heinous and horrific cases. And the case that I talked about fit that criteria. And the third thing was that there would be no question whether the individual was guilty. That only in cases where there's absolute certainty, out of 198 cases, 1 time. So I am, and also the other thing is that we have, the way it works, I'm gonna break your arms there. Last thing I'm gonna say is that there are people who are placed on death row from Alameda County before I joined the office before I got into leadership, and certainly before I became the DA. And the process is the DA has to request for that case to move to the next step, and I will not make that request.
All right, I'm a little worried about Mike's arms getting tired, but yeah, let's give Ms. Price an extra minute or so. Mike will take care of it.
3 minutes. All right. Thank you. Okay. So, I support criminal justice reform, and I support it because it's the right thing to do. In Alameda County, and I'm going to give you the actual statistics, 74% of Alameda County voters voted yes on Proposition 47, and that was in 2014. District Attorney Nancy O'Malley actively campaigned against Proposition 47 across the state. She wrote a Los Angeles op-ed piece calling it a frightening fraud. In 2012, almost 80% of Alameda County voters voted yes on Proposition 36 to modify the three strikes law. The CDAA, the California District Attorneys Association, sponsored legislation trying to increase the number of people sent to state prison and tried to keep Proposition 36 off the ballot. Ms. O'Malley is the second vice president today of the California District Attorneys Association, but she has been active in that organization and in the leadership on the executive board for many years. In 2016, we passed Proposition 57, and that was 77% of Alameda County voters voted yes. And the reason why we had to do that statewide is because the statistics on prosecutors charging juveniles as adults were absolutely horrifying. Alameda County, unfortunately, was a leader in that problem. In 2014, we were one of only 9 counties where the only children charged in this county as an adult were either black or brown children. Between 2010 and 2016, black children were 65 times more likely to be charged as an adult under Ms. O'Malley's leadership than a white child. Latino children were 27 times more likely to be charged as an adult than a white child. And so when we passed Proposition 57 statewide, it was to stop prosecutors from charging children and particularly targeting black and brown children. The CDAA not only has currently opposed the bail reform efforts, but has a long history of supporting bail reform. Unfortunately, what we hear in Alameda County is very different from the testimony that our district attorney gives regularly in Sacramento when she goes and argues against legislation that in fact would turn around our criminal justice system. We have to be proactive on these issues. Mass incarceration has devastated these communities and families within this community. And so I see my role coming into the district attorney's office, not only of representing and talking with you here in the county, but being part of the statewide movement, and certainly going to Sacramento and being consistent in what I tell you and what I say there. Thank you.
I'll try not to do any more 3-minute questions and a 2-minute answer. Let's see, here's one. Last week, the Alameda City Council heard a report summarizing 20 years of marijuana-related felony arrests. Black and Latinos were disproportionately arrested. How will your office better connect and understand communities of color that are over-policed and incarcerated? How will your office reduce incarceration?
Well, we are reducing incarceration, one, by not charging people as they come into the justice system brought in. We have programs that don't file charges and send people to class, depending on the type of crime. We don't charge them to go to class. We don't get any money for them going to class, but they don't have a record. We have collaborative courts that are moving people out of jail and into programs that are going to help them. And when they complete the program, such as mentor diversion, or veterans court, or mental health court, or the early intervention court, when they complete the program, their convictions are set aside. We're setting aside people's former convictions through Crossroads that we're working with the judges around, and also Clean Slate, which we created, which wipes convictions off of people's records. So the other initiative that I'm participating in is the barbershop forums. And the barbershop forums has really been a fantastic, over a year now, where we, meaning the police and people from the community, get together and talk openly and honestly about issues that impact them, about building trust or not, about the way that people have been treated by the police, about the way the police have been viewed by the community. And so we've been building bridges, and I'm part of that, and it's an important part. Building bridges, hearing what the community has to say, making sure that we're taking into account what the community is telling us is going on, and then building initiatives, as I have been doing for quite some time, to be able to change that paradigm. I created a committee, the Fair and Equitable Policing and Prosecution, and we looked at a diverse committee with influence from outsiders to look at our policies, our protocols, and our practices to make sure that we were always treating people equally, but at the same time taking into consideration equities. Have they had a lack of education? Have they been living in poverty? Have they been pulled into crime because of negative influences? That's where we consider equity, to make sure that we're helping those people get out of criminal justice and onto a productive life.
Obviously, as a woman of color, I can assure you I don't need to build a bridge to my community. In Alameda County, the racial disparities have just become atrocious. And I'll start with the death penalty, because I didn't address that previously. Can you hear me on this one? Multiple mics, sorry. In Alameda County, between 2000 and 2007, we sent 13 people to death row. During that time, Ms. O'Malley was the chief deputy district attorney and was presumably involved in something that they have in the office called the death committee that decides to send people to death row. Black people are less than 15% of California's population, but we are 36% of the inmates on death row. Alameda County is number 4 in the state in the number of death row inmates. So we still have a problem with sending people to death row, and particularly black people. If you know the Stanford study, and it talks about the practices of the Oakland Police Department, and that's just one department, granted the largest, but it's still instructive. So what they found in the Stanford study in 1 year in 2014, that blacks were 4 times more likely to be stopped by a police officer than whites, and when they were stopped without an arrest, 193 whites were handcuffed and 2,890 blacks were handcuffed. That when a traffic stop resulted in an arrest, 278 whites were arrested and 3,040 blacks were arrested. And so as a prosecutor, if I am aware of that kind of data, then I understand that I have to consider the constitutional implications and the racial profiling that is going on in this community and be very active about that. I also, as a prosecutor, would initiate not post-arrest diversions, but look to divert people pre-arrest. One of the premier ways of doing that is by having neighborhood courts. Thank you.
Okay, I believe this is going to have to be our last question. I have quite a few queued up, and I wish I could get to every one. I'm going to try to summarize and combine a couple here. Over the years, there have been numerous reports regarding the office of sheriff in Alameda County. The Sheriff Ahern is associated with white supremacist groups, has continuing building a relationship with ICE. His deputies assault and harm prisoners. There was a recent death in Santa Rita. The Urban Shield trains human rights abusers and deputies of abuse and even strangled inmates. Prisoners are denied basic rights, and I'm going to cut out a few things. What action should the DA's office take to investigate and put an end to what appears to be a pattern of abuse and misconduct in our county sheriff's office?
Well, let me be really clear. In my office, we do not cooperate or engage with ICE. We are the opposite. We have immigration policy that allows us or tells us to look at the charges, to look at resolution of charges so that it doesn't expose someone to a consequence that far outweighs the crime. We also are working with victims every day who are here, who are victims of crime, who are here without documentation through our Family Justice Center to make sure that they can apply for a U or a T visa that allows them to stay here so that they can continue to be safe here without the fear of having deportation. I support the work that we're doing. I lead the work that we're doing in immigration. I support the work that I'm doing with the Labor Council and with other people about rapid response when something is coming up so that people do know what their rights are. So that's the first thing. The other thing is in the Sheriff's Department. I'm not going to discuss the sheriff. He's an elected official. The filing deadline was last Friday. He's running unopposed. So what authority I have, the county council in Alameda County has the authority, the sole authority, to do an ombudsman or a review of what's going on in the Sheriff's Department. If somebody dies in the Sheriff's Department, we do an investigation. All the deaths we look at so far, asthma, somebody died from an embolism, these are natural cause deaths. But we have to wait until the autopsy comes so we can look to see what the cause of death was. But as far as reforming it, the sheriff is an elected official. And this is where I don't control the sheriff. When there are crimes that are committed in the jail, as we know they were, we're prosecuting those 7 officers who were instigating fighting or were committing crimes while they were in the jail. And so that's the authority I have, is to be able to prosecute the officers when they're breaking the law, to hear and listen to what inmates are telling us or telling their lawyers. And thank you.
The district attorney's office is more than just an entity, a law enforcement entity that is handcuffed. There has been for decades close collaboration between the district attorney's office and the sheriffs, and the mission and the understanding has been, from the district attorney's view, is that they are just an extension of the police department. And the sheriff has supported the current incumbent as she has supported him. So they have a long relationship. Our sheriffs, the conditions at Santa Rita County Jail, if you don't know, are appalling. We recently had a lawsuit filed, and it's not the first time, that women have complained that they're not, that when they're brought in, if they're pregnant, that they've suffered miscarriages, that in the conditions that they have not been allowed to have sanitary products, that they have been forced to sleep on the floor, the conditions that people have exposed that has cost the county millions of dollars. Our county has had to settle these cases because no one has held the sheriff's department accountable, because our district attorney's office has sat by and turned a blind eye to these kinds of abuses. That is not the role of the district attorney. Yes, the sheriff is an elected official, and the district attorney is too. And the district attorney has an obligation to this community to represent the interests of this community and to be a voice for justice, for fairness, for transparency, for equal treatment throughout the criminal justice system. I will not, as your district attorney, sit in my office and say, well, if they're over there engaging in unconstitutional conduct, there's nothing I can say or do about that. And don't tell me about it either. Because as my job, not only I will work with officers, and the district attorney's offices have always worked with police officers. When they retire, they go work for the DA. When the sheriffs retire, they go work for the DA. So they've always been one big happy family. We have to break that cycle.
Is this mic actually on? I can't it's probably out of batteries. I will speak loudly because we're almost done. So we're going to have closing statements now. Please convince us why we should endorse you, why we should vote for you. And we're continuing in the same order, so D.A. O'Malley and then Pamela Price. And it's 5 minutes each. I think I have the last word. We had switched over, so that now you're starting.
Well, thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here tonight. Let me just say that there's a lot that my opponent says that just simply is not true. She mischaracterizes what we do, and that's fine. That's campaigns. But I want you to know that you can look at my website. You can come and see the data. You can see the great work that's being done by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. We don't have mass incarceration here in Alameda County, and that is because of the District Attorney's Office and the hardworking professionals that are in my office. Ms. Price talks about legislation. I have 49 bills that I have written that have become law. And legislators call me and my office to ask us to work with them on legislation because we have credibility, because we are honest, we are forthright, we have ethics, and we also are progressive. And it's a progressive legislature. I have legislation right now with Rob Bonta, with SEIU. We're building legislation, working on legislation to require law enforcement to submit rape kits for testing, to require them to do it. So oftentimes in the legislature, I am standing against law enforcement, but this is a law enforcement job. And the district attorney is not the extension of the police department. We evaluate cases that the police present to us, and about 50% of those cases end up being charged, and many get deferred or other things happen because we're exercising our authority as the chief law enforcement office. This county deserves a respected, an experienced, an innovative, progressive DA, which I have been for most of my career, if not all, certainly when I've been in a position in power. I've taken on gun violence. I've led the charge against human trafficking, opioid abuse long before it became popular. We created the Family Justice Center because we could see a need, we could see the gap in services for people, and we filled the gap. Not only did we come up with, have the vision to fill that gap, but then I went out and found the money to do it. And I have huge community support because people in this community know that when the district attorney steps into the situation, that we're going to do everything we can to better the outcomes for people that live here. Public safety is paramount for many people. And it's the work that the DA's office has been doing that has brought public safety. The city of Oakland has new leadership. First, those police chiefs, that embarrassing week when the mayor fired 3 police chiefs. Their issue was personnel, not criminal. And they weren't all engaging in certain crimes. Their issue was personnel. And I don't have authority over personnel. So getting clear what the authority the DA has is really important to be in that job. I've tried a lot of cases, criminal cases. I have done almost every assignment, so I know what it is to be in the DA's office. And this is not a job for the faint at heart, and it's not a job for someone who's never been in that position. This is a job that requires experience, requires ethics, requires honesty, requires treating employees respectfully, of making sure that they're treated, they have a safe, work environment, and making sure that they are all operating with the highest level of ethics and integrity. My track record is very strong. My track record is one that you can look at on the website, both in my office and for my campaign. I've been able to generate over $180 million at the federal level for communities across America and Alameda County to test backlog of rape kits and to make sure that when somebody is sexually assaulted and they go to the hospital for an examination, that they will have justice by having that kit tested. As I said, the Family Justice Center is a wonderful place. 400 employees, of which I've grown from 300. With a budget in which I have found money to support all of the extra work that we've been doing. And I've talked earlier about the Justice Restoration Project and all the other collaborative courts, which are both replicated in other parts of the state and for which we get high praise. Let me just end by saying that I'm very proud to be the district attorney. I'm proud of this office. It has a reputation as the finest office in the country. And that reputation has been in existence since Earl Warren was the district attorney. Every DA who's come into the office in leadership has brought something. And what I've brought is a lot to this office. And I'm proud and humble to be the public servant that serves our county, that keeps families and children and victims safe, that gives people who have been involved in crime a second chance so that they can move on, that has given the focus to young people who have been sexually exploited and sexually trafficked, that supports our community-based organizations with my resources. I'm proud to have done that job, and I would be very proud to receive your endorsement.
First, let me say thank you again for all of you for coming out and for taking the time to know your DA. This is the first time in 50 years that we have had an opportunity to examine the record of the office of the district attorney, and that this community has had a choice. 50 years, 1966 was the last time that anyone challenged an incumbent district attorney. And then John Meehan, when he left, he appointed his chief deputy, and then when his chief deputy left, he appointed Tom Orloff, and then when Tom Orloff left, he appointed Nancy O'Malley. So she has been in that office for 30 years. And I can tell you that, I want to tell you two stories. Right now, Oakland, Alameda County is in the midst of the throes of people who are concerned about police accountability. We have the killing in Fremont of the 16-year-old girl who was not accused of any crime, suspected of anything, but she's gone. And her family has reached out to me because they don't have answers. They don't like the answers they got about the death of their child. We have the BART situation, and it's not the first time that we've had to deal with the killing of a BART officer. I worked on the Oscar Grant case. I saw the circumstances, the racial taunting that led up to the death of that young man. And I can tell you the officers who engaged in the racial calling names, they weren't prosecuted. I want to tell you about, and again, this is not the first time. In 2016, 70,000 people signed a petition sponsored by Courage Campaign to demand the investigation into the police killing of a young man named Hernan Jaramillo. He was taken from his house, wasn't suspected of any crime. His sister called the police because she thought that someone had broken into the house. The police came in the house, they took him out, they died. The thing that that struck me, the case that we know about in New York, the Eric Garner case, it happened in Oakland. This young man was saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. It was on video. And OPD hid that video for over a year and a half. 70,000 people demanded an investigation by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, and that did not happen. So we have consistently been denied justice for all of the community. Additionally, this data that I have comes from the National Center for Youth Law, the Hayward Burns Institute, the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Law. It comes from the Department of Justice, the California Department of Justice, where our police agencies and our district attorneys are required to report. It was Human Rights Watch that did a statewide report on bail reform and interviewed Ms. O'Malley, where she told them that she supported the use of the bail schedule. And the bail schedule is exactly what has been found to deny someone due process in the recent Humphreys case. So these things are not made up. The East Bay particularly is a hotbed for social justice organizations. Stanford has come and looked at everything in Oakland, so we know that those numbers are not made up. So I am not the person who's making this up. I'm the messenger. And for the first time in 50 years, we have a messenger. We have the right to know our DA. I want to end by telling you about another case that is appalling to me. It's the case of Deshaun Reed. He was arrested in Oakland in March of 2010. He spent 2 years in the county jail. After 2 years, he was determined to be mentally incompetent. He spent a year between Napa State Hospital and Atascadero State Hospital. Finally, his trial began in 2014, and he was convicted in May of 2014 of homicide. That conviction was reversed in January of last year because the court found that the evidence that was used to convict that young man was wrong, that he was wrongfully convicted, and that there was official misconduct by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. We have had 3 other exonerations in the last 4 years of people who spent decades in jail for crimes that they did not commit. So we need a different kind of justice. We deserve real justice, justice done right in Alameda County.
Okay, well, that is the debate. And please give both our candidates a big, giant round of applause for being here. I really appreciate that. As the saying goes, this is what democracy looks like. Not to be rude, but we're going to ask you both to say goodbye, wave goodbye, and that way the endorsement can happen. And also, if any other candidates who are on the ballot are here as well, Rob. Check. I think the microphones have a little better. So you want to talk about the?
Well, we collected $30, which is nice because that kind of helps us pay for the room. And the winner is 364. After 364. 364. Going once. 364. 364, last 3 digits.
Oh, maybe this one works. 364, did we get a winner? So if you have a ballot, which would happen if you are eligible to vote, you're a member who's paid up and have been to at least one other meeting in the past, please turn your ballot into the ballot box, which is over at the slightly injured Gabby Dolphin over in the back of the room. What's that? So we're going to be having a moment now that the candidates are the candidates clear to the room so that we can talk about. So anybody who's not a member, there's no point in staying unless you want to listen to advocacy. But if people want to talk about their favorite candidate and why they're voting for them, we'll just come on up and we'll just hand you the one remaining microphone to just talk for about 1 minute. Would you like to say something, Tom? By the way, congratulations on your new bicycle.
Thank you. I love it.
Okay, just like introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Anthony Brown. I live here in Alameda City. I'm originally from San Diego, California. And I'm voting for Pamela Price because there's not enough diversity. When I hear about the best county DA's office in the United States, I have to look at the White House, and I have to look at the Senate, and I have to look at who is representing me. And when I look to politics and American history, throughout all the years, I don't see anyone who represents my greatest needs or my children's needs who looks like me. When I look to history of America and I find the hidden stories of people who looked like me, they were taken before their time. We're now in a new phase and a new day where even the middle class are being attacked and white and blacks are finding we have a lot more in common by a system who oppresses us, who doesn't look like us. In the masses of systemic oppression, there's not enough diversity in the schools with teachers and law enforcement and people at the top who decide the rights and the rules for people who look like me and my neighbors and those who are being attacked by the housing crisis and so on. Now,
Sorry, try the mic or just speak up. Because unfortunately, it's not working.
Not working well.
Yeah, or you can just project.
Okay. One question I had that didn't come up, and that is the use of the grand jury system for dealing with abuses, such as in the sheriff's department, or in the city of Oakland, or in the Oakland police, or in these other areas where the district attorney talked about not being in charge of the police or the sheriff, but there is the grand jury system that has the power to investigate these types of situations.
Anybody else want to speak on behalf of any of the candidates? I'm really astounded that all 3 microphones died, but at least we made it through the debate.
Well, I would like to just say that I hope you vote for Rob Bonta and Barbara Lee, because there's no other choice, and I think they have represented us in excellent fashion. So I do hope, and what we want to do is we want early on to give both of those excellent candidates our full endorsement. And we were going to do it by acclamation, but we decided that would complicate things, so that's why we put them on the ballot. So I hope you vote for those candidates. Anybody else? Okay. We're going to count the votes. If you want to kind of just chat among yourselves, I'll give you a topic, Justice in America, and we'll get the results in just a few minutes. Thank you.